You're listening to the Hire Calling Podcast, your source for all things hiring, staffing, and recruiting. I'm Pete Newsome, back with Ricky Baez on a Friday morning. Ricky, good morning. How are you?
I've been better, but I'm doing great today.
So we weren't supposed to record today because you're supposed to be on a cruise, a brand new ship, having the time of your life with your family, and this is not much of a consolation prize. You're not on a cruise. You're with me recording.
Actually, Pete, what's supposed to be happening right now, I'm supposed to be really upset that we are getting out of our stateroom and trying to go through customs and get into my car and get home. But yeah, no, that didn't happen. We've been looking forward to this cruise on the Disney Wish. For those of you who do not know, that is Disney Cruise Line's brand new ship. It is beautiful. It's amazing. For the past few months, my wife and I have been going to bed watching YouTube videos on the ship getting ready for its first sailing. We're supposed to be the third family to sail in this on the third itinerary to sail on the ship. And man, one of us got sick right before we had to go, and Disney said, you can't come on board," which I completely understand. But yeah, we had to go to plan B, and we had to adjust and do a little staycation instead.
Well, you got to watch all the videos, so it's sort of like you were there.
Yeah, I mean, I love how you're spinning that, sir.
And like you said, you'd be dealing with customs right now, which no one likes to do. Waiting in lines, again, painful. So instead, you're in the comfort of your home.
Yeah.
You had a good week. I could tell on Facebook you were having fun, just not where you wanted to be having fun.
Well, you know what? Sometimes, Pete, when it's you can have the best intentions, the best plan, and you can prepare, but then life has something, some different plans for you. So you can either sit there and wallow at it, or you know what? Let me deal with the hands that I'm dealt, and let's go to Plan B. And we enjoyed everything Florida has to offer. Went to Epperson Lagoon in Wesley Chapel. For those of you who don't know, it's a huge man-made pool. I guess all pools are man-made, but it looks like a beach, but it's man-made. It's beautiful. So we discovered some things in Central Florida that we normally would not have had this not happen. So yeah, I'm okay.
That's a lot of kids in one pool.
Yeah,
I saw the picture.
Oh man, it was great though. It was awesome. But you know what? It's now I know it's a great reminder on how to keep a cool head, how to just, take it as it comes and just get ready for Plan B. It's all about flexibility there, Pete. And that kind of goes into what we're talking about today, right? How to be flexible.
I think so. You seem pretty excited about an article that you read. So why don't you share that and we'll get into it.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for a long time, Pete, and a lot of businesses, they put a lot of stock into how different generations communicate with each other in the office, right? And back in about 2008, 2009, when I was working for Orange County government, I was doing their human resources. We had not an issue, but I had to do a job at the Orange County Fire Department because there was a little bit of friction, right, between leadership and the firefighters. And if there's any team that doesn't need to have any friction, is the fire department, right? Because when you make a mistake, people die. It's not like when you and I make a mistake, we may lose some money, but in their worlds, right, if you don't follow orders, you make a mistake, people actually do die. So I did a training program over there on how the different generations work within the organization. Back then, it was baby boomers and Gen Xers that were in the workforce, and you had a lot of baby boomers that were at the beginning stages of their retirement. But then the stock market crashed. It was a big recession. The bubble starting to bust. And they said, we're not going to retire yet. My 401k is pretty low. We're going to stick around. And they kind of continued on with the top tier positions, leading people that were Gen X and Millennials. And it was a really interesting time on how to understand each other in the workforce. So it's happening again right now. I don't know if you've seen that in your time while running Four Corner Resources. Have you?
Yeah, well, it's the generational changes are very noticeable.
Yeah.
It's funny, there was sort of a lull that was talked about a lot. I mean, it was, you couldn't get away from it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think when the millennial cliches all started to come about, and we got away from it for a while,
Yeah.
I think, and focused on the reality of the situation. And everyone adapted, and now here we are again after COVID, which it seems to be the hot topic again is generational differences and having to work together and these generations overlapping. So why don't we define who those generations are, and so we know exactly what we're talking about here.
So let's define the 5 generations we have so far. 4 of them that are in the workforce right now. The earliest is the traditionalist. They were born between 1927 and 1946. Now, these are folks that really went through some hard times in the early 1900s, because this is where the Great Depression happened. There was a lot of people out of work, and these folks grew up in an environment where they kept everything, they hoarded everything because everything was valuable. Then you've got your baby boomers, right? So people started coming back from the war, and there was an explosion in population, and that is 1947 to 1964. Then after that, you've got your Gen X. Gen X were born in 1965 through 1980. That's us right here. And then your millennials, born between 1981 and 2000, and the brand new generation, which is Gen Z, Generation Z, born between 2001 to 2020. Now, this is interesting, right? Because you and I can remember a time when the internet didn't exist, where the rotary phone was in almost every household, and social media was non-existent. Whereas millennials and Gen Zs, especially Gen Z, they can never remember a time where the internet was never around. They can never remember a time where social media was not a part of their lives. So it definitely is a different mindset. So the article I'm reading right now, it's called Generations in the Workplace. Statistics show the impact of pandemic by age. This is by David Rice. This was about a year ago that he put that out there. And he starts talking about how the different generations right now clash in the office. You got 4 of them for the first time working together: baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs. And Pete, I'm starting to get a lot of clients give me a call and say, hey, can you come in and do this Gen Gap presentation over at our office? Because they're starting to either see things that are happening, or they kind of are aware of the gap and they want to prevent things from happening in the future. And I got to tell you, Pete, the first thing they ask me is, can you teach us how to deal with Gen Zs? And I tell them I can't do that because I don't know how to deal with a Gen Z. I don't know how to deal with a millennial. What I do know how to do is how to be flexible, how to be flexible with your thought process, how to be flexible with your work ethic. And you should teach all of your line managers and employees the very same thing, how to be flexible. So that's what we're going through right now. It's how to make sure that you have if you guys were a WWE fan or back in the day WWF, how do you control the Royal Rumble in the ring? So we'll see.
Well, you can't control it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's we know that. So interesting when you talk about flexibility. I was thinking back to an article that my daughter, who was interning for us at the time, wrote about the generations, because she's Gen Z. Now, she was born in 1999, and she was looking up, all we were trying to nail down at the time when exactly these generations began and ended. And so there seems to be some controversy about that. And I kind of laughed at myself where you said that, what you show that the millennials ended in 2000. She would argue that it ended sooner than that. I think in the mid 90s, and that's when Gen Z began. And what makes me laugh about that is no one wants to claim the millennial. They're all trying to say, "Oh no, I'm not
touching that. We're good."
I'm part of Gen Z." So she would have issue with that particular definition. But I think I think the point remains that these guys grew up in a different time. We have the baby boomers on one end, who believe in, I mean, this is general statements. Let's just caveat that we know that this is not intended to be about anyone individually, but hard work, long hours at work, climbing the ladder, so to speak, very traditional sort of old school approach. We're in the middle
Hmm.
as Gen X. We've seen both, right? We see the benefits of technology. We see all the good it can do. We also see the bad that it's done
Yeah.
to us, and so that's how I look at it. And I think most of my friends and peers, would look at it the same way who are close to my age. We're like, man, we're thankful for it all, but we also get a little nostalgic thinking about a simpler time, right? And since those of us who are um, in that Gen X range are the ones having kids who've grown up with technology, who don't
Yep.
know life without it, as you were saying, we see all the pitfalls that comes along with it. Except I think that they're smarter with it than we otherwise would have been because you know, I think the millennials are the ones that struggle, I think, and here's why. It came about when they were learning, to become their independent people, when they were becoming adults, when they were in high school,
Mm.
when they were in their 20s, that's when all this technology came. And what a bad thing to be thrust upon you and try to figure it out how to not do stupid things on social media, on what was the thing that existed before Facebook? The
MySpace.
MySpace.
MySpace. Tom, is Tom your friend too? He
Yeah.
hasn't returned my phone calls. Nah.
I think I created an account, didn't get past Tom with it, and probably never logged in again. But these guys were having to make it up as they went along in a
Yeah.
time of their lives, which is really hard. So I've thought about that often with that group. Is that, man, what a bad hand they were dealt with that. Where the younger ones, my kids, they're native to it.
Yeah.
We call my youngest, who's now 14, we would say he's first generation iPad because he was as a 3-year-old scrolling through an iPad, and instead of whatever you gave him before then. I don't know.
Isn't that wild? That blows my mind, Pete, because I didn't get my first cell phone till I was 23.
Right.
I was 23 years old before I got my first cell phone. And that was back in a time where, you still had to pay by the minute, right? You had to wait till 9 p.m. when it was free. My son's 9. You know what he wants for Christmas? An iPhone.
Of course he does.
I know, right? So yeah, it's different. I would venture to guess, yes. I guess you and I are saying the same thing. It'd be easier for somebody to grow up with this technology and is easier for them to deal with it than someone like you and me. Pete, I still don't know how to use Snapchat, right? And that used to be old technology, and just learn how
Well,
to use TikTok.
yeah. Well, you probably shouldn't use Snapchat.
See, there you go. You know that.
Well,
Yeah.
so I made a group text with some friends, and one of them said, well, I just invested more into Snap because I keep hearing how it's so popular. I'm like, is anyone who's not in school talking about Snap? And he's like, no, good point. I mean, I don't know. I don't hear about that one as much, but yeah, I mean, what a minefield to walk through. That's how I always think of it with these kids. But I do believe that the generation who is native to it all, they don't struggle as much. I mean, that's my
Yeah.
optimistic take on it, where they've been warned from the start. Don't post anything that you wouldn't want shared.
Yep.
But the millennials have had to deal with it in a much different way. No one was there to warn them. No one knew to warn,
Yep.
right, of all these
That's
things.
right.
They had to be the ones to find out the hard way. So now we have these generations working together, the two kind of extremes of um, the newest generation to come along. I mean, and I guess they're just getting in the workforce now, right? I mean, the Gen Z is really starting to take hold. I mean, has anyone trying to define them yet? Is as far as who they actually are in this article that you read?
It's an ongoing process at the moment, right? Because they're just starting to get into the workforce, and what people are seeing, what this article is saying, is that this generation, it's putting more things on blast on social media via TikTok,
Mm.
right? If you've noticed, there's a lot of TikTok videos out there of people ousting their employers who they believe have wronged them, right? Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's that's a bad thing to do. Put that out there because yeah, they're young and they're putting that on there and they think they're right, but this is something that's digitally preserved. And it's going to come back to you 15, 20 years later when you have a completely different thought process. Because, as you grow up in your career, you learn, you evolve, right? Your thought process changes. So I really feel bad for this generation because it's they're starting to put things out there on social media that they really should not. And if they ever want to run for president or really have some kind of a really good career later on, some colorful stuff, and I use that in quotation, that they've put on social media maybe 10, 15 years ago is going to come back to bite them. So that becomes into a big issue.
Well, there's a weird thing that started to transpire where historically, if a job didn't work out, yeah, you may harbor bad feelings
Mhm.
about the organization, about your manager, about the situation, whatever it might be. Um, but yeah, now there's a tendency to want to get them back, right? Like, let me share my frustration publicly,
Yeah.
um, and it's there's outlets like Glassdoor who provide that opportunity for folks, but just because it exists doesn't mean you should take it, right? Like,
Yep.
just because the
Yeah.
opportunity is presented to you doesn't mean you should do it. And because your employer knows who you are, right? I mean, everyone tries to be anonymous, and when we see those messages come up, if we try really hard to encourage anyone we encounter through our actions and through our
Mhm.
behavior to leave, if they're going to leave a review, for it to be a good one. But when people don't work out, um, there's a sort of this spiteful desire that comes out
I
sometimes,
don't
which
get it.
which is weird because, like, like, everyone knows who you are, and they're going
Yep.
to remember that. And what future employers would see is that if they did it to them, why wouldn't they do it to me? I mean, that's what I think. Whenever when I consider that someone has put something out publicly, and I certainly encourage my friends and family and coworkers not to do that. Like, if
Yeah.
you have an axe to grind, don't do it publicly,
That's right.
because you may think you're making the other party or organization, in this case, look bad, but it says a lot about you, and everyone who sees it is going to know that. So I don't know where that comes from really, but I know it's a thing, and it's a bad thing, and it needs to stop. Like, for our country, like, things don't always work out. Don't feel like you have to burn everything down on your on your way out.
I I look, I don't have any scientific backing with what I'm about to say, but I could venture a guess as to why people feel they have to do that. This is the first time they're engaged, they're experiencing something like that, and they feel like they need an outlet to express themselves, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? Sometimes people learn, sometimes you have something going on in your head and you're like, okay, this is the way this should be, but it's not. But once you verbalize it, it sounds different to you, right? So some people need to do that. What these folks are doing, they're just doing it in a way that it can come back to you 20 years from now. Look, if I thought the same way I did today, like I did 25 years ago, then that means I haven't learned anything in the past quarter century.
Yep.
I haven't, right? So some people may not understand that learning evolution that takes place in that time, and they will use that against you later. So stop doing that, right? But it's that's something that some of these folks are going to have to learn the hard way. And in my classes and everywhere I go, I try to tell the students is, please be careful what you put out there. Now I know we're kind of getting away from the whole generational gap thing, but it's the social media piece and how they are involved, how they involve social media into their lives is radically different than what a traditionalist would do or a baby boomer would do. Now, I'll give you this example, Pete. When I was working over at Orange County government, the biggest thing that I was encountering is that top leadership was baby boomers, and they were managing a lot of generational X and millennials. Here's the problem with that. when a baby boomer grows up in their career, exactly how you said, they stick to normally one job, right? Their resume is maybe a page long in a 25-year career, right? And you're like, right, this person, it's loyal to this company. Because back in the day, that's what people did. They wanted to get that job, that great job that they stayed there forever, and they got a pension, the thing that doesn't exist anymore. And that's all they wanted to do. But back then, the leadership hierarchy was exactly that, a hierarchy. If a baby boomer was to ask for a day off, that's exactly how they would do it. Hey, Pete, can I have Friday off? You say yes or no. Okay, fine, thank you. And then I'll walk away. Now, those folks, they're now in the top tier position, and they're leading people that don't ask for a day off. They tell you they're taking a day off, right? They'll say, hey, Pete, I'm taking Friday off, and Bob is going to take care of my stuff on Friday. I'll see you in the Monday morning kickoff meeting, right? For somebody who's not used to that, that's really going to ring, just rub them the wrong way. And that's when the friction started. And it's a matter of, although you are in the top tier position, and this is how you grew up in your career, you also have to understand that the people you're leading in this organization do not have the same experiences as you do, and they have a different work ethic, and they have to understand that in order to have a fruitful relationship in the office.
Yeah, I think it does need to be mutual, which I believe is what you're describing for things to work, where the baby boomers do need to realize times have changed, and even Gen X needs to realize times have changed. Right? It's not the world you grew up in. Where I want to help with the audience that I have, or the position that I have, which is of course revolves all around staffing and hiring.
Yeah.
To help the younger generation realize you need to also not see the world only through your particular lens, because your thoughts will change and evolve. And I think what social media has done in all of this is given a voice to a younger generation who otherwise wouldn't have one.
There
And
you
what
go.
I mean by that is you have this outlet to criticize your employer, since we're talking about that publicly. Oh, you wouldn't have had that pre-internet. You would have felt like the organization had all the power. They and there was really no recourse. And now it's the opposite. I mean, the employees have power. I mean, no company in their right mind is going to get on the internet and fight with a disgruntled employee. So you really don't. You're not. I mean, some do, and it's a bad look for them. Then, right now, you're going to a place that you just can't win that fight. But I think it needs to be a combination of the two, where I try to, as carefully as I can, encourage younger folks to learn from the wisdom of older professionals. They're not, they may not be as with it and is up to speed with all the technologies and things that are available today, but there's a lot of wisdom to be learned, from older folks, and being in the middle, I think we try to straddle both sides of the fence most of the time.
Now, I used to get frustrated because I used to, give that same advice to the younger generation coming into the workforce. So I get frustrated because they just don't listen, and I never understood why. And then it hit me. I was that way. I was that way too. When I first started in my career, I thought I had the world at my hands, and I didn't think anybody has ever walked down the road I'm walking down right now. Right? I think I know everything. So I was that way as well. And then once that hit me, I'm like, okay, I didn't realize the error of my ways until about my 20s or so, right? Mid 20s, well, maybe late, whatever, right? But what people need to understand is the older generation, right? Gen Xers, right? Baby boomers, we got to be patient. We got to be patient with the new generation coming in, and the new generation coming in need to be patient as well, right? They need to understand that we have a completely different point of view of that workforce. So it's that back and forth understanding, back and forth flexibility, and back and forth patience that's going to take us, that's going to help all four of these generations working well together. Because, dude, look, check out Gen Z. 2001 to 2020. And again, these are folks, again, that have never lived a day in their life without the internet. They don't know what they've seen the Twin Towers.
I'm going to challenge you with that. They have. Okay. I mean, so they and again, I'm thinking of that as more of the late, mid to late '90s.
Okay.
They started where they were children. They've never, without it, but they, I think they learned at a young age, right? So they lived a little bit without it. I guess I should say, right? A little
Well,
bit,
I mean,
because I'm thinking of my older kids who are, one just graduated from college,
yeah.
one's a junior in college. They had a life without. They may not remember it very much, but they did. It came on
Early on, I get it.
right. Yeah.
I mean, come on. You remember back in the early 2000s, you've got mail, AOL, that was it, right? That was it. We used to get all those CDs in a tin can that you got 10,000 free hours.
Yep.
I still collect those. I mean, they stopped sending them, but I got a whole bunch in my closet.
So the old, all I'm saying is, I don't want to derail you. The older part of that generation does, or the younger part does remember.
I love how you recognize that was going off the wrong end. You're like, let me bring them back. No, yeah, it's I'm with you. And here's the message for the business leaders, right? About being flexible. It doesn't just you have to be flexible in the workplace, but you also have to understand that when you're hiring, right? Because from a hiring authority perspective, or from a recruiter perspective, or HR, right? We tend to think, wow, if this person has moved jobs like once every year and a half or 2 years, sometimes that's a red flag, right? Generally. But really, is it, right? Because if it was a baby boomer that's moved around that long, you might question that more than a younger person that's moved around that long, right?
Mhm.
Because Gen Zs and millennials, they don't have the same type, and I hate to use it this way, the same type of loyalty that baby boomers had to their employers, and that's not their fault,
So
right?
I'm gonna challenge that a little bit.
Yes, sir.
In two ways. I have a lot of faith in Gen Z. Okay.
Okay.
I think that because they didn't, technology comes naturally to them, because they're wiser about it. Um, I think that the millennial generation got dealt a bad hand, in terms of parenting, the the world of participation trophies, the
Ah,
not wanting anyone to ever fail, instant gratification, having so many things that were tough to them, as they um that lack of loyalty. But I think we see value in loyalty too now. I on both sides. I do. As an employer, I see great value in employees staying over time because of the knowledge that they gain, the benefit that they deliver to the organization. And I hope that younger employees are starting to see that benefit as well. Now, as a staffing professional, if you have a resume where you've never stayed at a job for more than 2 years,
mm-hmm.
you the honeymoon period is real, right? It's like buying a house. If you buy a brand new house, nothing breaks for a while.
Yeah.
But how you adapt and deal with problems as they arise after a number of years is going to help shape and define you, and make you better. And so, as an employee who you've never had to go through cycles, you've never had to go through ups and downs. Maybe you were there. If you're there less than 2 years, odds are you've only been down, or only been up, or only been in the middle.
Yeah.
You've not had to ride waves and get on the other side of them. And I think if you're early in your career, or from the start of your career, you've never done that, you're not. That limits your attractiveness as an employee. That's my take. And now, let me just say, after that, then I don't see in current times, it's a concern, right? But if you've
Yeah.
never had to like climb the mountain, I assume you're going to bail when times are tough, right? If I see a resume where it only is, and now does that make me sound like old guy? Do you think? Like I
Well,
said, I'm in both camps.
I was about to say, because it's that I think you're looking at that from your perspective, right? It's in I used to see it that way as well until I learned more about how different generations think. Now, when I say the loyalty piece, I don't mean that in a bad way, right? Because the environment created the environment that we're in right now with the employee employer relationship. Because I would venture to guess about 40 years ago, when most people stayed at one job, one company, excuse me, for their entire career, I would have to venture to guess that layoffs were not as frequent as they are right now. So now now they happen, but not as frequent as it's been happening in the past 15, 20 years. So now that they're happening very frequently, I would have to think that people would feel like, wait a minute, if my job can be cut away just like this and it's just business, right? Then I can go to any organization and feel or not feel fulfilled and jump around until I feel that need, that my career aspirations has been fulfilled. But that's the new generation thinking that way. And the only reason I have a preview to this, because it's I teach over at a college here, and I see these students come in, and I see it through their eyes, and some of them are right, some of them are wrong, Pete. And then the biggest mistake that some of these students that I see them make, and just a little sidetrack here, is as soon as they think they get that college degree, that the heavens are going to open up, that these jobs are just going to fall on their laps. And I'm like, bendito, it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't, right? Unless you go to a powerhouse school like Princeton or Harvard or one of those that just having the name on your resume gives you some kind of credibility. But I guess what I'm saying is that me seeing it through the students' eyes has changed my thought process on how I approach hiring. And I'm assuming you have done that as well, just owning a staffing agency for so long, and you got kids age in that era right now that they're about to hop into that job force. So you see it differently than I do. That's why I'm like, whenever I see somebody who's younger, who's hopped around quite a bit, I don't balk at it as much as I would have somebody who's um, been doing one job, just a baby boomer, right? Again, that's bad to say, right? Because from an HR perspective, I'm not supposed to be looking at that, but I'm a human being, Pete. I'm just having a conversation here. This is not how I actually operate, but it does help to have those
Well,
observations.
it's so there's benefits to both of staying at a place a long time,
Hmm.
because it shows fortitude that is necessary, um, as I mentioned a minute ago. But it also limits your exposure to a
Yeah.
variety of things and different experiences. That's a downside, and I've seen that too. I mean, there was a candidate that just on paper was so great, and he was great. He worked over 10 years, first job out of school, it moved, advanced, and we placed him in his only second professional position, and he really struggled because he was so used to only doing things one way, and it was really hard for him to adapt. And he ended up bouncing around to a couple places. He stayed at our client, for maybe a year. In the role we placed him in, he went to another job, came back to our client, went to another job. I mean, guy just it went from very, very stable long term to probably having 5 jobs in a 4-year period after that. And so there's a downside to just only being at one place for too long. But I look, I mean, we're talking about what's ideal here, and
Yeah.
no one really has the ability to, um, take a piece of paper and write down exactly what's going to happen on your career path. We know that, but I think you should see value if you're a young professional in longevity at a place, not for 10 years, but for more than a year or two, to show that you can stick it out, to show that you have grit, to show that you can be promoted, right? That you can earn
Mm.
the ability to advance, for someone to say, yes, you've done such a good job here. We're going to give you that next opportunity with more responsibility. And when you only advance through hopping from one job to the next, it doesn't show that. And listen,
Yeah.
we could pretend it doesn't matter, but employers notice, employers comment on it, employers read resumes with that in mind. So there's something to be said for both sides of it, and maybe that's what makes me the Gen X, is that I do see both sides of it. I'm not all
Well,
or nothing.
well, Gen X, we're known as the generation of I'll do it myself, right? It's that's why we're known to be very independent. I was a latchkey kid growing up. For those of you that don't know, it's 14 years old. I was at home with my little brothers while my mom was over at work working two jobs and going to school, right? And I don't know if any generation that's done that since, right?
Yeah,
Because
and it's we don't know, and that's where again, sorry to cut you off, but
sorry.
kind of the millennials. That's where I think that made us stronger
Yeah, it did. I'm with you 100%.
as
It did.
people. And all the cliches are true. Come back when it's dark. Like I would leave with no way to communicate. Right, my parents could
Yeah.
find me if they wanted to, because I didn't know where I was going when I took off on my bike at 10, 11.
No GPS. You just go and explore the neighborhood, go two towns over, go into an abandoned home, hang out, and then come back.
But
Or
with
maybe that was
good
just me.
intentions, we've
Yeah.
protected that younger generation. Where I think again, Gen Z, I look at it as well. Everyone's realized that some of these things like participation trophies weren't the best idea,
Mhm.
and so they're getting the benefit of those corrections along the way. But you really do see that how cyclical
Yeah.
generational changes can be. And so I'm highly encouraged by what I think Gen Z will deliver, and the baby boomers still having to interface them it was an interesting is an interesting mix, just because they don't speak the same language more than anything else.
Oh, that Pete, come on. It's that I'm struggling these days, right? I heard somebody say the other day, no cap,
Ah,
right? And
yes.
I was confused about what he meant. And I'm thinking, no cap. But now I was embarrassed to ask what he meant. But as we kept in the conversation, I found out, oh, he means no lying. He
Right,
means he's yeah, so, see,
right.
you knew that. I did it. I'm having this conversation with this guy who I'm trying to help him with a situation at work, right? And he starts talking like that. And I'm like, yeah, it's just Ricky, just keep looking. Just keep looking, and somehow yeah, that's what he meant. So brand new, brand new generation, brand new language. Something interesting, Pete, and I don't think if I mentioned this to you a couple of years ago. I was you know how I do disrupt HR. I had somebody come in and do a presentation on different generations. Did you know that the United States of America is the only country that labels these different generations? No other country does that.
We have
We're
to
the
label everything. That's
we
what
do have to label everything. I
everything needs a
know.
label.
No other country does that. And I found that fascinating that we have this need to label it. But at first I'm thinking, wow, that's crappy. But then I'm like, but it makes sense because if we didn't have a label on it, if we didn't separate them, we wouldn't know how each one ticks. So the more we learn how each generation ticks, the better we can communicate with them, the better that we can have those solid relationships at work to where this would work out. As if I don't think that would have been the case if we just let people to their own devices. So I just found that really interesting that we're the only country that does that. But yeah,
And
it's flexibility is key and it teaches stuff that. So I'm glad we're doing it.
I don't know if labels are working out so well these days, Ricky.
I, I I get it, but for this right here, for
I
this particular,
don't know if current things in the US are the things that everyone else, the standard anyone else should be held to. Um,
oh Lord, oh, we love labels, don't we?
so we've gone a little crazy with them, and that's where it, things like the baby boomers in particular, as they're talked about so much right now because they're leaving the workforce, but they're still in charge in many respects. An article that
Yeah.
I read earlier this week was in reference, it was questioning why they're not leaving. Why you see these ancient politicians, who were running things, right? I mean, between the president, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the Senate, the minority leader in the Senate, these people are, you know, they're old by any standard, and um, why are they still here? Why have isn't the goal once you've made it to not, to be able to go enjoy yourself somewhere? Um, and they're not doing that. I'm not really sure what the point of the article was. It was on LinkedIn, but the guy was just saying how, they need to go away basically.
Well, I mean, so with the example that you just produced, I mean, yeah, obviously there's, I mean, there's an incentive there somewhere in somebody's pocket, right? Why else would they not be retiring? But I do know
Well,
why it.
I'll tell you what the logic. I mean, I think part of the article was it like the technology evolving has made it easier for them to stay. I mean, these guys are, their jobs are, they're physically able to do it, because of the enable what technology has enabled them to be able to do. So they can, physically, even at 80 years old, still show up and work, which again, I'm not sure what the motivation for that is entirely, but
Well, if they're able to understand it, right? Because I'm 45 and I'm having a hard time with some of these apps there, Pete. But I could tell you why in 2008, 2009, baby boomers stayed, right? Because I was in HR back then as well, and I also was part of the benefits department, and we also forecasted who was supposed to be retiring, right? And when I think I said it earlier, when the market was just really having a bad time generating any kind of return on investment, people decided to stick it out because their 401k just wasn't as thick as they thought it was going to be, healthy as they thought it was going to be. So sometimes it's for monetary reasons, right? So they stuck around some more. But then, what we haven't talked about, Pete? The opposite. You do have some Gen Zs and millennials that are in the C-suite situation, and they're managing baby boomers and Gen X. That's happening right now. Mark Zuckerberg one of them? He's a millennial, right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
Well, they probably love having them. I mean, I would guess, right? They're like, for all the reasons we talked about earlier, they're loyal. They have great work ethic.
yeah.
They now communication may be a challenge, but everyone, that immediately comes to my mind when I think of the baby boomers, they're employees that I would want. You don't buy into that, huh?
No. I'm not saying I don't buy into that. It's we said the phrase work ethic quite a bit on this podcast, right? And you saying that one more time, it kind of hit me. What makes the work ethic from the baby boomers so much different than the work ethic of millennials or Gen Zs or Gen Xers? And I guess the only thing I could think about is passion. How passionate are you about what you're doing? Because that's what Gen Zs and millennials want. They want to be able to make an impact. They want to be able to be involved. So if they don't feel that passion, maybe they go somewhere else until they find it. I'm just.
So I think it's a lot of things, but I think it's expectation in the way you were raised, and from a young age, working, being taught that life's hard, right? I mean, I look at that. So the baby boomers were raised by people who had gone through the Depression, as you mentioned earlier, and they had to, they were born from after the World War II.
Traditionalists, not baby boomers. I'm sorry. No. Traditionalists went through the Great Depression.
Right. That's who baby boomers were raised by.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Yes.
So they, those, now we're talking about my grandparents who, would tell stories of, a life that's hard for us to even imagine. And so then the baby boomers, had their parents had gone through World War II, and just think about that. I mean, when you think about what that means, so being appreciative for the life that you have, for being, hard work was not seen as a bad thing. It was seen as, almost an opportunity to, like people were happy with what they had, and not, and again, these are broad generalizations, but then those, the baby boomers, wanted a better life for their children, and they raised them with that in mind. They gave them things that they didn't have. They rewarded them in ways that they weren't rewarded. They allowed them to have a voice that, long before anyone would have given them an opportunity to have a voice. And then you add technology on top of that, right? And that the greatest enabler of all, where there's a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you know who he is.
I know Gary V.
So I I he he's
Generations
he's
are
he's, enter-
great.
he's entertaining, right? He's very
Yeah,
successful.
yes.
He's entertaining.
Yeah.
It just kind of says the same thing over and over. But one of those things that he says is that he uh, he 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 worked his butt off at a very young age. I think he's a great voice because he's popular with younger people. I mean,
Yep.
I will say that. And he said, "Look, I didn't start offering my opinion to other people until I was well into my 30s."
Mm.
And that's an important thing to me because you have to you, like do something first, right? Yeah, earn the right. And so that generation, um, the baby boomers were taught like don't speak until you're spoken to, right? Kind of. And then they raised a group of the generation they raised, they were like, "No, you can be anything, and you should be happy all the time, and no one should be able to do you wrong, right?" And they're the ones that again the participation trophies came about,
Yep.
which is awful. So why a different work ethic? Well, because they were raised in a different way, and told different things, and so um, do I think life should be about work? Absolutely not. Do I think that people should find what makes them happy? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But I think there's a price to be paid for success. And I think if you try to skip that, then you're never going to be happy and you're never going to be satisfied and you're never going to really be successful. And you can't have all of the good without that being taken into consideration. So that's a very long-winded circular way to get to the point, which is I think the baby boomers realize you have to work to achieve.
Yeah.
And anyone who doesn't realize that is going to be dissatisfied constantly and hop and all of that. So should people be passionate about their what they do? Yeah, but you got to get there first. You can't just come out of the gate and say, I want to be on top and I want everyone to report to me and I want life to be easy and I want to make the world a better place. Great. How? Well, just because I want to, right?
Yep.
That doesn't there has to be something in between becoming an adult and getting to the place you want to be. And sometimes that may take years.
It's I think what you just said is gold there, Pete. How, and I don't think everybody's talking about that. We keep focusing on these generations, but we don't focus enough on what shaped these generations, and that's the previous generations, right? And I guess the more and more we label these, and the more and more we study these as the decades move on, the more we're going to be able to predict what the next generation is going to be based on how they were raised, right?
Well,
Because yeah, because you're right. It's the reason baby boomers are the way they are is because they were raised in an environment that it was really bad, and that's what the traditionalists went through, right? With the Great Depression, and you had to preserve everything. The baby boomers, they went ahead and they cultivated the Gen Xers, right? And then the Gen Xers, I believe that's the first generation, and I think I read this somewhere that really they had to grow up with broken homes, whereas the previous generations that was not as common as the Generation X has saw, right? Because I know I saw it, right? I grew up in a single parent home, and almost everybody I know that I've grown up with grew up that same way. So yeah, that cultivates a different thought process. So that could be a part two for this episode there, Pete, because I'm really enjoying this kind of taking dissecting what people's thought process are, and that's going to help us as leaders to make sure that not that we're supposed to make sure all employees feel safe at work, but we know how they think, we know how to challenge them to get the best out of their talents, and this relationship that we call employer-employee relationship. I mean, I guess that's what we're saying here.
yeah, it's I don't know what the even title of this show would be at this point. But interestingly,
AOL.
I mentioned to you right when we jumped on that my 14-year-old is starting high school,
Yeah.
and I was this morning went to parent orientation, and the principal said, was listening what's important to her in her role, and she said, priority number one is safety, and I went, priority number
Hmm.
one is safety. Like, what boy, what? How sad is that?
Yeah.
Where not education shaping them for the future, their minds and all of these things, and teaching and learning, safety.
Wow.
Number one, to make sure that someone's not going to come in and harm the kids. Like, what the hell? That is, it's great. It's necessary. I won't say it's good that she said it. It's terrible that she had to say it, but it's necessary in this world. And I'm sure lots of parents heard that and went, oh, thank goodness, because I'm worried
Yeah.
to send my kids to school. I mean, what a tragedy that is. Now, the second thing that stood out for me, and this is my youngest of 4, all going through the same school. She said, one of the things that's also a priority for us is to make sure all the kids are heard. And I'm like, man, I struggle with that one. And I do, because you know what? I think their job is to listen
Yeah.
when they're 14 years old. Do we need to listen to them in return? Sure. As a parent, I mean, yeah, of course. But you can take that to an extreme. And I think that's what's gotten us into so much trouble as a society, is that the 14-year-old may have an opinion. And I'm happy to listen to it, but like,
I
you
can tell
get
you're
1
struggling with
vote,
this, man.
you get 1 vote, I get 9. Like, that's,
Yeah.
that's how it goes. And I believe we've gone too far with that, where I, everyone has their place, and to speak from a place of authority, you have to earn it, right? You shouldn't be
Yeah.
granted that. And I don't know. It does make me sound a little extreme, but I see the damage that is done by giving too much. I'm trying to think. I'm struggling to come up with the right word, but too much
Well,
of the voice.
Well, it's you and I grew up in a different environment, right? Because I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, I spent half of it in the South Bronx and half of it here in Orlando, and both South Bronx was more intimidating. I'm not going to lie. When we had surprise metal detectors 3 times a week, right? Because you just never knew, and over there, man, it was survival of the fittest. Over here too, when I grew up here, it was survival of the fittest. Bullying was rampant. Teachers didn't care. They just like, you know what, deal with it. And then when my niece graduated high school, and I go to her graduation and meet the teachers and everything, and I was just baffled on how accommodating, how friendly everybody was, how everybody's so caring and teachers cared. And I'm like, I've never seen that in high school. Not me, not in the mid 90s. So it's different. It really is different. And
It
I
is,
guess
but
so.
just caring isn't necessarily conceding, right? Caring doesn't mean giving you what you want. Caring means doing for you what you need, in many respects. And that's where I think we've blurred the lines too much. And I know that's not really what you mean, but when I hear that you're like, they care now, well, didn't they care then? But they just cared to show us the value of discipline.
See, so that could be it too, because I haven't experienced what you're experiencing right now. Because I'm thinking about what you're saying, Pete, when the principal says, I want to make sure that everybody's heard. I'm thinking, all right, I get it. But just because I hear you doesn't mean I have to do what you say. Right? Okay, I heard you. I got your opinion. Thank you. We're still gonna go do whatever we were gonna do. Right. So I think that's the lesson there, right? That just because you speak and somebody listen, it doesn't mean you're right.
It's just we're so far off.
I love it though. Come on, I love it.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to listen to this, but
Come on.
As a parent, it is a struggle between, do I want to be, how much consideration should I give to the feelings of my child, right?
Mm.
Who, and I think we've taken that too far. I do.
Okay.
Now that may, I don't expect everyone to agree with that. I don't really care what other people make decisions as a parent, but
yep, you're a Gen X.
Well, you know what? You know how you can tell whether you're a good parent? Look what happens when they leave the house, right? Look what happens is that is the only judge and jury of how well you did as a parent. And look at what's happening around a lot. How's it going? Is that how you thought when that baby was born? Like, boy, I hope one day. Look, I'm going to get in trouble if I continue down this route. But the results speak for themselves, good or bad. And I think when we see some of this stuff in the schools now, where I'm like, oh man, I want to make sure they're all heard. Like, I guess, but I want to make sure they're hearing the teachers. Like, that's why I'm sending mine here. I don't need him sharing his opinion at school. Like, you don't need to hear mine, right? Too much.
I get it.
I don't know. Maybe I'm in the wrong.
So these are the folks that are going to be hitting the workforce in about 10, 15 years though, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And they're going to expect to be heard from the day they walk in.
I see that.
Why don't you wait to say anything? And this is the Gary Vaynerchuk point, which I think is just so spot on. Why don't you listen for a while before you share in
Agreed.
return and
Agreed.
learn? So that's my, I guess that maybe I'm the old guy now. But
well, I don't know. I don't know. Have you yelled at kids to get off your lawn yet? Has that happened?
No.
Not yet. No. Okay, because that's when you know you've made it to that retirement age. When you start yelling at kids to get off your lawn, you start getting upset that you go to Denny's at 5:30 and the early bird special is done.
You know why, Ricky? No one yells at kids to get off their lawn anymore because they're all inside playing video games. You know what? How about I'm going to yell at kids to get on my lawn? That's what I want to do.
Get off those devices and go out and explore the world like we did back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's
a good point.
I'm starting to get on my lawn movement right now.
Oh, that's great. There it is. TheLawnMovement.com. Go ahead and order it. Get that website right now. We're going to start a new movement there, Pete. We got this.
Get on my lawn.
Oh, man. Now, getting back to this lawn, the message for the client, the message for the people, the message for the people who are hiring other people is to be flexible. Just understand the different generations that are coming into the office and just practice flexibility, practice empathy, reasonable empathy, right? Again, not empathy going into, I feel sympathy. No, it's just practice reasonable empathy and flexibility, and you're going to have a much better work environment.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that these things exist, whether they should or not is not what's at issue. It should not be, right? And it was for me for years. So you can tell I have strong opinions about parenting and how young people should evolve, because I do believe that everyone should look in early on and say, I have to climb the mountain. I'm starting at the bottom. I have to figure out how to get to the top, and it's going to take time, effort. On my other podcasts, as I've shared with you many times, which is stories where I'm speaking with people who've achieved career success. Without exception, every one of those stories involves adversity, time, putting in your time, grinding away. And I love it because I want that message. It's an important message to get out there. Like, stop telling kids what they want to hear. Tell them what they need to hear.
There you go.
And so, but to make it about the work situation or the work environment, you're inheriting this as an employer, and you don't have to fully accept what what those lessons have been, but you have to expect that you're going to have to adapt and to make changes. But I think there's an opportunity still to be in the middle, right? And that should be the goal of not too extreme. Like, hey, like, you're not going to just automatically be promoted and have things handed to you. But on the other hand, we can accelerate those things. We can be more creative as employers with how we can provide rewards that are now expected along the way, sooner, faster. And I've had to adapt with that for sure, where I'm like, don't talk to me for 5 years, put in work for 5 years, and then we'll see how things are going. Right. I'm kidding with that. But at the same time, you'd be doing yourself a disservice as an employer if you're not evolving in this regard.
And for the people out there who are looking for work that are in any of these later generations, and Pete, I think that should be the name of this episode: the price of admission. You've got to pay that price. You got to pay that fee, that entry fee, for you to get there and be like, I made it, right? And the price of admission is that time. It's putting in that time, putting in that work, putting in that grind to make sure that that passion really moves you in such a way that you are now that leading authority in whatever it is that you want to be an authority in. But it's not just going to happen Instagram famous quickly, right? Like, sometimes it does. The price of admission is there. You got to pay it if you're going to do something worthwhile. So that's the message for everybody coming into the workforce right now. Just grind, learn as much as you can, And once you start figuring out that you're now the leading expert or one of the people who know quite a bit, then you start giving advice, like Gary Vee said. I love that guy, by the way. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a hoot.
He is.
Be passionate about being the best you can be at what you're doing first, right? And then, I mean, again, very few people, no, I won't say no one, very few are going to have their dream job coming out. Very few are going to end up, very few are going to have a straight path to where they're trying to go. So make the most of your time where you are. And then that's the best route to ultimately end up where you want, right? And I'm not saying this very, very well, but that be passionate about maximizing your potential in any role, right? That you're in, and then figure out along the way what you want to wake up and do every day that gets you the most excited. But it has to start with, you have to put in the time.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. Yeah, put in that time, but be passionate about something. Except, don't be passionate about shortcuts. That's not going to work out for you, right? That's not going to work out for you at all. Just that passion has to be there. And look, here's the thing: once you start focusing on that passion, right, everything else is just a side hustle. Right, that's what it is. And if you keep going that route, other people see that. Other people see how you light up when you start doing certain things that you really enjoy. Your leaders are going to see it. Your friends are going to see it, and that's when your true self is going to come out. And this is another show.
Yeah, it is. So for the older generation, I think the message that we wanted to deliver today was, like you said, flexibility. You have to be flexible and accommodating. We all have to change and adapt as the world is evolving very, very rapidly. I mean, we all have to. I have had to. I mean, and Barry, some of the things that I would consider to be pretty strongly held beliefs that I can hold on to them and not benefit, or I can adapt and say whether I think it should be this way or not. This is the way the world is, and we have to to play by those rules.
That's right. That train is leaving at X time, and either you're on it or you're not.
That's it.
Right? You can't control the train. There you go.
All right. So I think our train can leave now.
People have been waiting. They have been waiting.
Well, there's no one left waiting. It's just us, buddy.
I love this.
But awesome. That's okay. And listen, if you are listening, please rate the show. Please subscribe, and we love your feedback. We'll continue to do Q&As as we get a few questions in. Right. I understand your steak lesson was very well received.
Come on now, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
So thank you for that.
Even vegetarians were like, "Wow, that's a great idea." Yeah, no vegetarian said that. It's okay.
So awesome. So anytime, hirecalling@fourcornerresources.com is where you can reach us. Ricky, have a great weekend. Everyone drive safe, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one. Good night.